Welcome, everyone. It's overtime. Welcome to a special edition of the Stadium Journey podcast. Stadium Journey is the leader in sporting event reviews for the traveling sports fan. Please visit our website at stadiumjourney.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Today, we are pleased to be joined by some of our regulars and some of our guests. Welcome regular Marc Viquez, follow him at Ballpark Hunter, and our special guests, Stadium Journey Western Canada correspondent Jim Flannery, and friend of the show and host of the Alouettes Flight Deck podcast, Tim Capper. Gents, thanks for joining us today on this special day, for staying up late for our friends in the West, or well, I guess it's the East that's staying up late.
The East.
Thanks
province.
Thanks for coming out, because we try and be timely at Stadium Journey sometimes, and we've had some what I think is pretty big news this week, because it has been reported that the CFL and the XFL are in quotes deep discussions to form some sort of partnership. Now, when this was released on various media platforms, the typical Canadian reaction has been one of mass panic and fear that our beloved Canadian Football League, which is beloved more when it's on its way out than maybe when it's here, is in trouble. And, you know, do we trust The Rock? Dwayne Johnson, who the Americans like to remind us has ties to the Canadian Football League, but most of us who are fans of the Canadian Football League know that he was not there long enough to have a cup of coffee. But what do we think? What do we think this all means? What do you think, guys?
We can only speculate right now. I mean, you know, are we expecting one of the leagues to become 3-down football? Are we expecting the CFL to become 4-down football? These are two different codes of football, and I don't see the two leagues merging to form one league and playing against one another. However, I don't know. I would assume that maybe it has to do with marketing, player movement, TV contracts here in the States. It's a lot to take in, because I think the XFL needs to worry about itself, because I don't know what that looks like. Is it going to be the same 8 teams from last year? Or they're going to have new markets? You know, the CFL's got some woes as well. They lost a lot of money this year not playing. So I'm not sure how these two leagues are going to – I think these two leagues separately have to take care of themselves. I think the CFL has a long, rich history of football, and the XFL is still hasn't proven itself. And this will be what, the XFL 3.0? So I'm just speculating right now. I won't be shocked what I hear, and I probably will be surprised what I hear. I don't know what to expect from this. And right now they're just talking, nothing concrete or major.
I think that's actually the issue itself, is that that's all they're talking. And we hear Randy Ambrosie say something, and it's whether to believe Randy Ambrosie, unfortunately, if he's just politicking and just saying what he has to say. I think that, I mean, you look at The Rock. Yes, he has ties to Canada. It's because his, father was born in Nova Scotia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But these are two different leagues, and there's two different leagues at opposite ends of the calendar. So there are way too many variables right now to determine how these leagues could possibly get together. And I think, what was the term that was used in the original presser? Collaboration. That can mean anything. And then everybody starts spouting this, that, and the other. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I would tend to agree as well. We don't have enough information to move on. I mean, the CFL has had associations with the NFL in the past, where there was discussions at one point, as I recall, of the CFL turning into something like a minor league system, which never really happened. And So right now, what does that even look like? I don't know. Again, like every time The Rock has a new movie out, we in Alberta get to see the one picture of Dwayne Johnson wearing a Calgary Stampeders jersey that exists on Earth from when he tried out for the team and failed. But yeah, are we going to put the two leagues together? I don't know. Are we going to mess with the rules between the two? I don't know. Is it going to become a farm system thing? There's just not enough information to say one way or the other at this point, I'd say.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the only thing that seems to make sense. The XFL being a farm system for the CFL, but I can't see the XFL wanting to wear that hat at this moment.
Yeah, I put on Twitter that if this becomes like a merger, instantly the CFL/XFL becomes the football equivalent of the ECHL, right? It's just there ceases to be anything unique about the league anymore, and we lose the Canadian content, which is a huge thing from Canada's point of view. Was when they expanded into the States, it was a big bone of contention. These American teams now didn't have any Canadian content, and what was the point of the CFL? And hey, let's face it, as Canadians, we showed our inferiority complex over the last few days, and had a mad freak out that this was the end of the CFL, which I will say it's not a bad thing, right? If we're having a mad freak out that this is the end of the CFL, that means that people actually care about the CFL.
That's good to hear. That's good to know.
So, but let's face it, it's been pointed out that in the three biggest markets, the gates have been pretty rough the last few years. In fact, heading in the wrong direction. From a Toronto standpoint, the idea had been for a long time that the Argos just had to get out of the Rogers Centre. It's just too big. They just got to get outside. They got to get to a real football stadium. And then they did that, and the attendance dropped in half, which I don't get it.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's a little strange. But one thing that jumps out at me is what does the CFL actually gain from the XFL? I'm not sure. Does anybody have an answer to that?
Other than possible money from the investment group that's behind the XFL and The Rock and his ex-wife Garcia. I mean, it's I said maybe marketing, but you talked about TV contracts before. We're already on ESPN 3 and 2. So the last time the CFL was on broadcast TV was during the NFL strike in the 80s, right?
1982. Yes,
yeah.
You could be right. I remember reading watching a report on that many years ago.
I think it was NBC. I think NBC had a game. It was, but anyways, yeah, it was during the scab.
So we're not 40 years on that already.
Yeah.
And that was unique circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know other social media platforms, other apps that the XFL has access to that will bring the CFL on. I have no idea. And you're right. They're just talking right now. So I don't see the benefit of the CFL except attention. We have a bunch of Americans talk about Canadian football right now, saying, yeah, let's bring 4-down football to Canada, which I don't think that's going to be a wise decision. I always looked at the Canadian football game as, it just never progressed to add the 4th down as college football did in the States. I think it was 1912, 1906 is when the 4th down was added to the U.S. football, NCAA. And that was the same year the forward pass was there. And of course, the CFL didn't add the forward pass until the 30s. They still have not added the 4th down. I don't think they will. If they do, that would be football in Canada's version of BC and AD, if they do that. So, I mean, if they are going to merge, I would assume if that's the case, they would have to play an XFL type of game. and maybe that opens it up to American audiences who are now going to watch it. But I can't see that happening. I really cannot see that happening.
Well, and I think it was further pushed by, we had the original announcement, and it wasn't just like a few reporters who were talking about maybe this is rumbling in the background. It was an official press release from Randy Ambrosie. And then you had June Jones talking, who has experience, right? Like he former head coach of the Hamilton Tiger Cats for a few years. And he went after that. He either went to the XFL or the AF, and I can't remember which. But he was spouting out that, yep, they're gonna have 4-down football, and just sounded like a very American. And I don't see what the CFL has to gain if they go to an American style that really opens the gates. And I know a market like Toronto will be, not that Toronto's a very good football market in any sense, but it will be full on now. Like, why bother with this? We're Toronto. Let's talk NFL. And I don't think the NFL is in any position to be heading into Toronto either. But that's, out west. I mean, you guys, Jim, probably have a totally different view, because it's, that's the lifeblood of the CFL. Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and Calgary and Edmonton.
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly is. And I think if there were talks of a true merger, from my perspective at least, abandoning the CFL style of game to adopt the American style of the 4 downs and the smaller field and the fewer players and the whole shebang, it kind of eliminates what makes the whole sport unique. I've argued for years that, in my opinion, the CFL is a better game played by inferior athletes, just because the dollars are so much smaller. The people with the big talent stay in the United States. So if the goal is to merge the two leagues and sort of turn it into a multinational XFL, I don't know that necessarily does anything for either league, because it doesn't really set them apart from the NFL in any major way. It doesn't really give them anything to hang their hat on. So as Tim was saying, I think if they're going to be putting these two things together, the thing that the CFL gets out of it is dollars and resources. Beyond that, I'm not sure what the end game is.
But does the XFL even have dollars and resources to offer?
That's a perfectly legitimate question. Yeah.
Well, considering who Redbird has in their portfolio, I mean, they got oodles of money. But it's just a matter of how much do they want to put into the CFL? We're not talking the late 90s where the CFL or they borrow $3 million from the NFL for marketing. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then the failed American expansion. But there's just so many variables. And who was it that somebody was posting on social media that look at how many current XFL players are in the CFL? Aren't we already technically a feeder league for the XFL? So
yeah, exactly. Because most guys that are in the CFL want to play in the NFL, or they want to move to the XFL to play at home. One of the problems I had following the sport as a young kid is just had a lot of player movement. I wish you would have some players that would say, "Hey, I like the CFL," and you do. This is where I want to make my living. I love this city that I'm in. Maybe you met somebody you fell in love with, but I don't want to see the CFL be a feeder team, a minor league, or second division either. But I would personally like to see the Canadian Football League expand to other markets like Halifax. That seems to be impossible, yet they want to do something with the XFL. Worry about Halifax first, then worry about the XFL.
Well, all it took to stop Halifax from happening was a global pandemic.
What was that? Not that they had time prior, 36 years before, to do this, but
this also
we're so close.
But this also assumes a long-term view of the XFL that we've never had before. And fill in the blank. We don't have to talk about the XFL. You could talk about the AAF. You could talk about the UFL. You could talk about the World League. You could talk about the USFL. There have been 100 different leagues that have come in and gone out in the same amount of time. The CFL has been around. When did the Argonauts Rowing Club kick into gear? Like 1898 or something like that. Like it's
been around for a while.
It's been around for a long time, and maybe it's. And I get it from a player standpoint. You want to make the most amount of money that you can, and especially if you're a CFL player or an XFL player like that, that's a really short career. But there's nothing that has shown me yet that there's staying power for a second football league in the United States. That is almost exactly the NFL. The Arena League, totally different. That's barely the same sport, right? But
code, yes.
You got the NFL and you got college, and then the opinion in the States to me has been that it doesn't really matter. Maybe it's okay for a little bit, but we don't really care that much. And another piece of this big equation, one that I was actually surprised by, and not being a follower of what was going to happen in the XFL, they're not even going to play this year. They're set to start in 2022.
Well, now they're on pause for 2022 unless whatever happens with the CFL. What makes sense is if the XFL is a feeder system to the NFL, that makes more sense. Obviously, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Who knows? And like I said, who knows where the XFL will be by 2022? I hope they're back. I would love for them to come back. But like I said, they're still a mystery. And they want to do something with the CFL that right now is just in talks. I mean, I can tell you many stories before I met my wife. I met a pretty girl that I was talking to, and that never led to anything. So this is kind of what, you got somebody's number and she never called you back. So, maybe you had that one conversation, but who knows? I'm curious. I wouldn't be shocked to hear the news. And then again, I wouldn't be that upset to hear the news I wasn't expecting to hear. So hopefully they tell us something soon. I don't. It could be 6 months from now and they still don't have anything news to tell us.
Well, hopefully in 6 months we'll be within the current CFL season. That's the hope. But yes. I think one thing we need to look is the history of 4-down football in Canada. I think the only real technically staying power for 4-down football recently has been out in BC for
Simon Fraser.
Thank you, Simon Fraser.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They're the only full-time 4-down football that's of any consequence. But you look at what Canada's gone through with the Continental Football League, World League of American Football, the exhibitions, NFL exhibitions, and I'll even throw in for Toronto
the Bills.
Yeah, the Bills. Mm-hmm. That's what I was going to say. And then the college exhibitions.
Right.
Sorry, the college bowls.
Right. College bowls. Yeah.
The only one that really had, if you look at the history of what it was recently, Montreal actually did well when the Machine were here.
Great uniforms.
Yeah, they were, for their games for their 2 seasons, I think they did quite well. But other than that, didn't the games in Toronto with the Bills, didn't they taper off?
They ended that agreement early, and really that whole thing was about Ted Rogers, and don't forget when it started. So the whole Bills thing started with Ralph Wilson, right? So while that agreement was in place,
mm-hmm.
And that was between Ralph Wilson and Ted Rogers. Well, now where are we at the end? Well, Rogers is gone. He had died, and also Ralph Wilson has died, right? And they had moved on. Thankfully, not to Donald Trump. I don't know. Unfortunately, not to Donald Trump. I guess it all depends on your.
I would have been fine with that.
On your perspective, but you've got the Galisanos now, who are the owners of the Bills. But Tim, you brought up Simon Fraser. I think it's fair to say that Simon Fraser football is really just part of a bigger Simon Fraser issue, which is they want to compete in the United States.
Yeah.
Not just in football. I'm not even sure if they want football. I think it's kind of part of their division that they're in, that they have to have football, and they're kind of keeping it because if I remember correctly, Simon Fraser football has been pretty terrible since they moved to Division 2.
Is it Division 2? I last time I remember them being an NAIA, but is it Division 2?
They were NAIA, and then they moved back to, at that time it was CIS, and then went back into Division 2. Jim, are you catching any Simon Fraser Division 2 football out there? Or?
No. I mean, the only connection I'm coming up with off the top of my head, and this seems to be sort of a uniquely BC thing, is that the UBC Thunderbirds baseball team also plays south of the border in the NAIA. And I mean, Jeff Francis, formerly of the Colorado Rockies, he was a UBC kid who made it to the majors. So there seems to be a pro-American sports attitude in that sort of Vancouver area that maybe pushes somebody like Simon Fraser to want to be in there rather than be in the CIS for whatever reason. And I couldn't even begin to guess why that is.
So how does that bode for Canadian for four-down football in Canada? Because you look at the history. You know, Toronto's been all pro NFL, but yet they had their regular season games. I mean, yes, Montreal and others had the international bowls or whatever they called them back when. I know there are two of them here in Montreal, but they're exhibition games. Same thing with Winnipeg. It was an exhibition game. Would four-down football really work? I think that's the question people need to think about.
Yeah, and let's face it, Toronto is a very different market than the Western teams, different than Montreal. I mean, Toronto is very much a front runner kind of market. I think there were a couple things at play with the Bills. First of all, they were from Buffalo, which I don't think it's a stretch to say that people from Toronto view as inferior. It wasn't their team. So I went to one of the games. You saw as many, they played the Seahawks. You saw just as much Seahawks gear and everything else gear as you did Buffalo gear. It wasn't really a Buffalo thing. The liquor laws in Ontario are so vastly different than they are in Montreal. In Buffalo, people from Toronto will go, if they want to do NFL, they'll go down to Buffalo and they will party up in the parking lots, and they'll hop up on the RVs and jump off and swan dive and break tables and all that kind of stuff. Was that happening in downtown Toronto? Heck no. Like Premier Doug Ford tried to loosen up the liquor laws, and that wasn't even all that great. I mean, the Argonauts have tried. They've tried to have tailgate parties and whatnot. But when you can't bring your own beer, that seems to be really the stopping point.
So you can't bring your own beer to a CFL game before and drink it?
Nope.
Really?
No, you have to have a license.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's the college games. I went to all the college games, all the international college bowls. They were fine. Probably the most populated one was where Buffalo was there, the UB. There was nothing really. I mean, it was a secondary, tertiary bowl. It wasn't like you were getting Alabama and SEC teams or anything like that. I think the official matchups were a team from the Big East and a team from the MAC. So that's not a lot of drawing power. So, is it the game in Toronto? I don't think it necessarily is the game. It's, it's that view of is it big time? We're Toronto. We're the third biggest city in Canada / US. Minor league stuff isn't for us.
You see the size of our tower? Come on. Look how big our tower is. It's huge. It's a freaking huge tower.
The only minor league stuff that is really, really flown, what I would call minor league, lacrosse has done fairly well, but it's really tapered off in the last 5 years, 10 years. And the Marlies have done well, but the Leafs have worked really, really hard to build the Marlies. Nothing else that is under the top tier now has really taken grasp. So
yeah, the Phantoms didn't even draw well in 01 and 02.
No.
Oh, the Phantoms.
No, but I think Toronto views itself as Canadian when it's convenient, right? Mark, you said you were saying uniquely Canadian. Like, Toronto doesn't view itself
Canadian.
as radically Canadian. Yeah, no, that's not us.
I mean, come on, Mark. I was wanting you to say it in French. Come on.
Oh, yeah, that's not good. We'll be here all day doing that. Yeah, it's I could be growing up in New Jersey. We had arena football, and we had the Generals and the Knights and the Enforcers, and arena football never drew well in the New York market. The spring football actually did. It drew reasonably well, but it wasn't there long enough to really get a good baseline data. So, I could see the Toronto market as, we like hockey. We got the baseball, especially when the Jays are doing well. They'll pack the Sky Dome. Obviously, the Raptors are a major draw. MLS soccer is huge. I think there was one year correct me if I'm wrong, the Grey Cup and the MLS Cup were both held at BMO Field.
Yep.
The MLS Cup was the hotter ticket. Or was that a playoff game? Maybe that was the hotter ticket than the Grey Cup.
No,
something along that lines.
Yeah, the MLS Cup, I think it was hotter. It was probably also significantly cheaper.
Okay.
Yeah, it guaranteed, it was Toronto FC playing, right? It was the home team as opposed to whoever happened to be in the Grey Cup that year.
So now you have this new professional sports club in town that's taken away some of the thunder that hopefully you wanted for the Argos, which is a shame, because I was just watching the documentary about the 1971 team, and they said once we started winning, people started coming out, and you would see a packed exhibition stadium, and you're like, wow, how cool would it have been once the team started winning, and once this team had sort of this legendary status to it, to see a packed stadium. And the Argos have provided some good teams in the recent years. They've had some Grey Cup wins. They don't always do well, but it's not like they're long-suffering fans.
Well, it's a rather famous quote that in 1970, I want to say 77, John Bassett was in Exhibition Stadium doing some work with some of his guys, and there was a Jays game going on, and just the noise, and he said, guys, I think it's over. So like that 71 team you were talking about, well, that was before the Jays came. And and also the Argos were ungodly awful from the mid 50s all the way through to that point. So yeah. But here, I mean, we've talked about what does the CFL get to gain? What does the XFL have to gain from this partnership, whatever it could be?
Beats me.
I think arguably they could be gaining a certain level of legitimacy. I mean, the XFL has had basically two kicks at the cat to get themselves up and running in a substantial way. The CFL has been around for more than a century. They're very well established. In the grand scheme of things, they're kind of small time, but they're a thing that has been around and will probably be around for years to come in some capacity. So they're kind of a known quantity, then you can pretty much count on it that each team's going to draw somewhere between 20 and 30,000 fans a game for the most part. Maybe not all the time, but there's a level of consistency there that the XFL maybe would aspire to, just as a guess.
Or is this some sort of publicity stunt, the XFL? Some rouge that they want us to buy into?
That's great.
Because I am just totally miffed. I just think the XFL needs to get off the training wheels and have a successful season. They have not had one yet. And, you know, they took 20 years off. They're back. I wish them well, but maybe credibility. Maybe you're absolutely right. You know, the NFL's not paying attention to them. So you go after the second level of this American Canadian style of football in the world, you know. And I guess the CFL's like, okay, we'll listen. We'll give you our number to you. So, but yeah, that's I have to agree with Jim there. I just credibility. I don't know what else. They're not going to bring in 3 downs to the XFL. You know, maybe they bring in the unlimited man in motion in the backfield. Maybe they bring in, I don't think they'll even bring in the field goal post up to the front. It's mind boggling. That's why I would love to know more about this, but I think before anything is said and done, I think the CFL needs to kind of take care of its business as well. And hopefully the XFL is back in 2022 in some form, hopefully in St. Louis where they were accepted very well.
Yeah.
And we can continue playing because I think there is a market for spring football for 10 weeks done right. But you start talking all sorts of different football leagues, you know, you can confuse a lot of your fans out there.
The XFL, I think, also was there. They were going through a transition for year 2. They were going into smaller. They were going to go into smaller stadiums.
Yeah,
like
that's key.
Like New York was going to be switching to, I think, was it Red Bulls Park? I think
Red Bulls Arena.
Cool.
Yeah. Which makes sense. MetLife, they had no business playing at MetLife.
No.
Wasn't the Washington team playing at the DC United? Was it Audi Stadium or something like that?
Yeah. The only movement I heard was possibly Tampa Bay moving to Orlando.
Oh, that too. Yeah, and actually a moving of a team. Yeah, I heard that too. Yeah.
And then Los Angeles perhaps playing elsewhere, maybe not necessarily.
Birmingham and San Antonio. Don't all of these leagues have Birmingham and San Antonio in common?
They all have.
They all have. Memphis. Don't forget Memphis. You know,
I mean,
like San Antonio. Yeah, those are like almost whenever you have one of these rival football leagues, Birmingham, Memphis, Orlando usually has one.
Even the CFL. Birmingham, San Antonio,
right, they did.
Memphis, Las Vegas.
Yeah, and then Oakland, that's an open market. Would XFL go in there? Would they go into Portland, Oregon?
Can the XFL and gain any sort of access to a workforce? Right? Is that part of the deal? Is that what they're looking at? Like an easy access to a player's bank?
Wouldn't it be kind of the other way around? I mean, they would be looking at players who would finish their seasons in October, November, then have access to the CFL pool. I mean, we know there are players by the dozens that are available to play football. Why does it necessarily have to be the CFL player pool? Maybe some sort of agreement like they kind of had with the NFL, even though it has hurt CFL, having that open calendar, so to speak, where players can go, because these 1-year contracts in the CFL are hurting the league by far.
One of the great things that, and you know, it's that Canadian inferiority complex. One of the great things I love about the CFL is guys like Johnny Manziel and Andre Ware these big name guys who are, they're all puffy and I'm going to come up in the CFL, a piece of cake. I'll be back in the NFL in 10 minutes. And then they find out that it's a totally different game and they can't do it. And there is a litany of players who can't play the Canadian style, which makes it that much better. You have to find those special players who can do a certain thing a certain way. Now, it's a little bit less so than it was, back in the 80s, where you had a guy like Warren Moon who could run like a gazelle and who had a cannon. And, they didn't want to, the NFL didn't want a black quarterback to just hand off to whoever their running back was, right? The NFL has changed significantly where the passing game is that much more, whereas the CFL game, it seems to have always been that way, at least since, the 70s, where they were passing all over the place, far more than the NFL was. So who knows? I'm really having a hard time getting my head around what either side is going to gain out of this partnership. Maybe it's just as simple as scheduling their seasons so they're not competing. Maybe that's where it's at.
They already don't. They already have seasons that don't overlap, correct? I think the XFL is February to May, at least June, and then CFL is July to November.
Okay.
I mean, I can't see CFL playing in February.
No.
No.
Nope.
Unless you have a dome stadium.
Yeah, I mean, if
the
it's
BC Lions playing against nobody.
If it's a case of swapping players around a little bit and using those two seasons concurrently, then it might take on something like a model that professional lacrosse has, where the National Lacrosse League playing indoors starts in December and wraps up in May-ish, and Major League Lacrosse outside starts up May-ish and runs into the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And about half of the players in those two leagues are the same guys who basically play lacrosse year-round, and that's how they make a living, because neither one of those sports individually is enough to pay the bills. So,
well, I don't think anybody's playing in the Major League Lacrosse anymore.
It's kind of dead, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But what you're saying is absolutely true. The PLL is still not playing at the same time. So,
Yeah.
So what do we think? Let's as we're wrapping up here, let's handicap this. What do you think the odds are that anything comes of this, or anything significant comes of this?
I think right. You have to say right now it's 50-50, because if you see the way people are talking in media, it's either one way, the game's going to change drastically, or the game is not going to change. Because very eye-opening interview from Herb Zurkowsky of the Montreal Gazette came out yesterday, and he talked with the owners of the Owls and our president. Very eye-opening. I think it's probably one of the most clearest interviews of what they're looking to happen.
Okay.
It's a very interesting article. And then you hear, who was it that said, Rod Peterson. I got to use him as an example. What he caused the other day on social media and on his show. When it comes to supporting the league. But nobody knows what's going on. I don't care what June Jones says. I really don't. So I'm sorry. I'm still, because we really don't know anything. It's 50-50. It's really all that it can be, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think I have to agree with you, 50-50, because I can't see third down football disappearing, but I can see maybe some rule changes. Like I said, I'm not going to be shocked, and I'm not going to be stunned, or, like if they say, hey, we're going to merge and we're going to play it this way. Okay. We're just going to have player development and, TV contracts, or, we're going to adapt some of the rules. Maybe there's missed field goals to be worth a point in the XFL now. Oh, okay. I can see that. So yeah, 50-50. I can't even lean towards one or the other, because Americans will not want to see 3-down football, and the Western provinces will not want to see 4-down football. Will be not radically Canadian anymore.
What do you think, Jim?
I would be inclined to agree. I'd say there's no better than a coin flip's chance of something actually coming of this. So I guess we'll see how it plays out. But what shape it's going to look like if they do decide to do something is anybody's guess. You can throw some darts at the wall and see what sticks. But I don't see 3-down football going away. If they blend the two leagues and put them together, including blending the rules, at least we still don't have any fair catches, which drive me crazy. So I guess we'll see.
There's one thing that I think we may have glossed over a bit, and that is that the ownership situation in the XFL is probably a lot better off than it is in the CFL. You have a new set of owners who really haven't lost a ton of money on anything because they haven't had to put any money out yet. Whereas in Canada, you have some publicly owned teams that can't be in great shape. With the COVID wiping out the whole season last year, you have the BC Lions, which are really in flux. I don't really know what's happening to their ownership group, as they're being, they're currently owned by the estate of David Braley, and what is that going to look like? And then, you've got the Argonauts that are just newly part of MLSE, and you've got the Alouettes, who have a fairly new ownership group as well. And as much as you may love TSN and their coverage, the CFL still brings in the most money at the gate, and there was no gate last year. And I'm not sure how bad the situation is financially currently in the CFL. Maybe that has a lot more to do with this talk of partnership than anyone is really letting on. But 50-50 coin flip, it sure brought some attention to the CFL in a very short period of time. And radically Canadian, we were typically Canadian and had a bit of a freak out on it. And I was probably leading the way on that one. So, well, maybe not leading the way, but I was definitely in the pack. But anyway, anybody have anything that they want to add in parting?
No, like I said, they're just in talks. So we'll keep our ears tuned, eyes tuned to see what the next story is. But Dave, you hit on something that I didn't even think about. Yeah, the XFL is probably in better financial straight ownership wise, which makes a lot of sense. Well, the CFL may be coming to them.
Yeah, they've only reported $60 to $80 million losses for this CFL, and technically Redbird and The Rock and the other ownership group, it's only 15 million because that's how much they bought the league for out of bankruptcy. So,
yeah. Can you imagine, Winnipeg and Saskatchewan after they've put big, huge public dollars into these really nice stadiums, and then all of a sudden, poof, the league's gone, and they're going to be left holding the bag for these giant stadiums that now hold university teams where 600 people a game show up. I mean, that could be some tough political chow to munch on. I don't know.
Let's hope that
I think it's 6 of 8 teams that have done some sort of either new stadium or work. The only two that really haven't would be
Edmonton, Montreal.
Oh yeah, Edmonton, Montreal. Calgary too.
Calgary's the one. Everybody has done at least something. I mean, Edmonton didn't Edmonton have a big reno in the
Edmonton did a big reno, I want to say close to 10 years ago.
I was about to say, yeah. Percival Molson went through it, and it was about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep. Hamilton's brand new. Ottawa's new.
Half new.
Calgary's done some work, but they haven't done a lot.
Yeah. Calgary is the outlier there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to take much for the ownership group there to say, for the Flames to say, yeah, okay, we're done. Thanks. Bye-bye. We'll focus on hockey. But
yeah, well, they're getting their new hockey rink soon. So I wouldn't be shocked if they're already starting behind the scenes to push for a new football field. Because, we are in desperate need if the Stampeders are going to continue to be a thing.
But how much is your buddy going to be all in on a new football stadium after sort of being forced to be all in on a hockey rink?
I can't confirm or deny this in an election year because he hasn't said anything, but I think my buddy, the mayor of Calgary, might not run again.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see.
All right.
In which case he won't be part of that decision.
Won't be part of that decision. Yeah. Well, I know Gary Bettman will be extremely upset and sad to see Mayor Neshi. Did I get that right? Mayor Neshi?
Neshi, yeah.
Not run. He'll be sad.
Yes.
Anyway, on that note, I want to thank you guys for joining us on an unusual day. Jim, thanks for coming on. Let the viewers know where they can follow you on social media.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at LeftBridgeJimbo.
Awesome. And Tim, when's your next podcast for Alouettes Flight Deck coming out?
Just had our season 6 launch last week. Unveiled our new logo for the podcast, and we're hoping to do every 2 weeks. But head over to any of the podcast aggregates or head over to alouettesflightdeck.ca to catch up, or you can follow me on Twitter at Repact. That's REPPACT.
All right. Thank you. Mark, where can all of our favorite viewers and listeners follow you?
You can follow me at Ballpark Hunter across all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I chronicle my visits to ballparks, restaurants, bars, and city lifestyles. So check that out. Subscribe, like, comment. New content every week, Mondays and Thursdays. So Ballpark Hunter at YouTube.
All right, and you can follow me at ProFan9 on Twitter, and if I ever get to go to a game again, maybe on Instagram, and watch for our regular Stadium Journey podcast. Actually just dropped yesterday with Greg Larson, who was the author of Clubby, and keep your eyes open for a new episode of Obstructed Views in the not-too-distant future. So for Mark and Jim and Tim, thanks. This is Dave Cotney saying that this is the point where Paul usually inserts a clever song lyric, but I don't have one, so have a good night.